Hi, this is Dave Wanta with AdvancedIntellect.com, back with another video about IPMuncher. In the last video, I explained how to download and install IPMuncher. It's been running for a little bit, and now I'd like to walk through some of the features and screens. So it's been running, and down in the communication window, we see that we've got attacked by this remote IP. So based upon the rules and the way we set them earlier, we said that, hey, if a remote IP attacks the machine and attempts to log in 3 times within 3 minutes, let's go ahead and block that at the firewall. So IPMuncher detected it, and so we see we've got this 146.130 IP address. Let's go verify that it's in the firewall, and let's just refresh and get the latest. So, and right there it is. So our IP address has been blocked, or the attacking IP address was blocked. We can double click and open it up. Little bit of description. It says this rule was generated by IPMuncher. So if you're as an administrator and you're wondering where they came from, all IPMuncher rules will be prefaced with IPMuncher block IP. So in this case, this saying this rule was generated on this date, and as long as the IPMuncher service is still running, after 1 hour, it will be removed. Again, this is configurable, and we'll show how to do that in a little bit. So let's walk through a couple of these different screens. Usually the dashboard is the first screen you'll see. Let's close our communication window. And remember, the communication window, it just allows the GUI to talk to the underlying IPMuncher service. So we're going to close that down. Overall, let's just close all windows. So this is the application. Up here are some quick links. They're some of the most popularly used windows. We have the rules window. We have the Windows Firewall window. We can get to the IPMuncher service, the alerts window, settings, and if we want to send an email to IPMuncher.com. This also gives us a status update of the service. If we want to immediately stop it or restart it, we can click one of those 2 buttons. If we want more detail about the service, we can click that and we see the service status. From again here, we stop, refresh it. We can actually uninstall the service from Windows. It does not remove the application, it just removes it from the service manager. So let's start with the dashboard. The dashboard is usually the first screen that you'll see when you start IPMuncher. And in this screen, we see the services that are running. We see the IPMuncher services running. We see the Windows Firewall is running and the profiles that are running. We also see the last 50 IP addresses that were blocked by IPMuncher. This is part of the archived rules that we'll see in a little bit. If we wanted to see the past 50 or 500, we can just enter that and hit enter. This is a brand new install of IPMuncher, so we see that there's only been 7 IPs have been blocked since we've installed this application. If we want to monitor, we can actually have IPMuncher monitor the Windows Firewall, and we can enable firewall monitoring. And what this will do is IPMuncher will pull the firewall service and the profiles to see if they're running. If they're not running, we can have IPMuncher take action. So we can say basically, hey, restart any of these profiles. If this can be used if some malicious service comes in and decides it wants to shut down the profiles to open up more access to your machine. So IPMuncher can go ahead and restart those. We can also send a notification email telling you that, hey, IPMuncher restarted this for whatever reason. Right now, we do not have the email service enabled in IPMuncher. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. So we get this little warning message that says, hey, the mail server properties have not been set. Here we would set our mail from and our mail to address, and then we would basically say, hey, check these services every X number of minutes and attempt to restart them Y number of times. We can configure this. So we're going to just go ahead and uncheck this for now, save our configuration. Now, what we've done is we've saved the settings for IPMuncher, but we have not told the IPMuncher service to recognize them yet. So what we're going to do is this little message is telling you about that. So we click OK, and after we're done, we're just going to want to restart the IPMuncher service. We're not going to do that right now, but we'll do that in a little bit. So let's move on to our watch rules. So by default, IPMuncher comes with 5 different rules. 2 of them are enabled by default, the RDP attack rule and the SQL Server rule. We saw those earlier in the other video, so I'm not going to spend too much time on those. Let's move on to the file system rule. The file system rule allows you to create files to the file system and just contain a single IP address. IPMuncher will monitor a directory, and your application can just drop these files there, and IPMuncher will block the remote IP. So this is useful if you have an application, say you have a website, and you detect comment spam on your website. For whatever algorithm you want to use, you determine that, hey, this is a comment spammer. Rather than letting that comment spammer continue to attack your website, or just rather than just diverting them to a different page, you can actually block them at the firewall. And let's show you how to do this. So let's open up this file system rule, and right now the directory is set to IPMuncher, but we really want it in a different directory. So we've got this IPMuncher directory, and let's just say we want to create a new directory called blocked IPs. Okay, we can create it, we can call it whatever we want. Okay, so we just call it blocked IPs. And we're going to tell IPMuncher to monitor that directory. So let's find it, blocked IPs. There we go. And on our general properties, we're going to say enable this rule. And let's just say that if the same IP shows up in this directory 3 times in 3 minutes, we're going to go ahead and block that IP for 1 hour. Okay, let's click OK. So we just re-enabled this rule. Again, we have to restart the service. So let's go ahead and restart it. And let's open up our communication window that communicates with the IPMuncher service. We're not connected, so let's go ahead and connect. And we're going to just dock it down below. Okay, so here we go. So we have this directory here. And again, I'm going to simulate our application dropping a text file in there. So let's say we have a website. It's detected that a comment spammer is coming in from 1.1.1.1. We would write a simple text file out. It doesn't matter if you're using PHP, ASP.NET, or whatever technology you're using. We just drop a randomly named file in there. As long as it's unique, it doesn't matter. And all we need to do is have an IP address in there at the very first line. So let's just minimize this. And we're going to click File, and we're going to save it. And IPMuncher service detected that file. Now, based upon our rules, that IP would have to come up 3 times. If you wanted to immediately block it, you would have changed the rule to say, hey, if it shows up once, then go ahead and block it. But we want to be just a little more cautious, so we said 3 times. So let's just go ahead and save it 3 more times. Now, by default, let me show you something else. That file immediately got deleted as it was processed. So in this case here, we're not resaving the old file, it's actually creating a new one. So we're going to go ahead and save one more time. It got saved, IPMuncher immediately processed it, and because it detected the same IP address 3 times, it created the firewall rule to block 1.1.1.1. And let's go to the firewall. We're going to refresh it. And lo and behold, there it is. It just showed up. So in this case here, we call it the IPMuncher file system rule. It's an IIS block. That's just the name of the rule that is found in the settings. We can change it or we can duplicate it. I would recommend you create a new rule rather than modifying the default rules, simply because then you always have your default rules to rely on. And where the Windows Firewall name came from, it's inside these brackets, and you can match it to this root name here. So we said block it after 3 attempts in 3 minutes. So we simulated creating 3 separate files. If we wanted to block it immediately, we would have backed this down to 1. So as soon as it was detected, it would have got blocked. But let's cancel out of that. So we've got this file in there, this IP address blocked. It's actually a legitimate IP address. So let's go ahead and unblock it. So that brings us to our next screen. And this is a listing of all the IPMuncher rules that are created in the firewall. So let's go ahead and we can either remove this rule from here, or we could have removed it in the firewall. But we've got it highlighted here. Let's just delete it. It's asking us if we're sure we want to delete it. Click yes, it's removed, and we can verify that it is removed in the firewall. And it's now gone. Okay? So let's go back to one last rule, back to our watch rules. There's a log file rule. The log file rule is a little bit different than the file system rule in that it will monitor text-based log files. So like SMTP files, IIS logs, whatever you want. you write a regular expression. When that regular expression matches a line, a newly written line to that log file, IPMuncher will block that attacking IP. General properties are the same. So in this case here, it's a smarter mail log file, and it's monitoring smarter mail for the entries that are indicative of dictionary attacks or somebody trying to log in just using dictionary attacks. So right now it's disabled by default. It's not enabled. If we wanted to enable it, we could. So let's close out of that. Move on to our next screen. IP address list. By default, IPMuncher has a number of the most popular countries of IP address list of their IP addresses. So, for instance, the United States has a listing of all these. You can go out to search Google or wherever. If you use your favorite search engine, you could always find the latest list, put them in here. You could create new lists. We want to add a new one. Let's just go ahead and create a new list. In this case here, let's create a blacklist. And let's use our favorite 1.1.1. We're going to add it. And let me show you where these lists can be used. So we go back to our watch rules, and let's pick the RDP rule. Let's say that we know that everybody coming in to legitimately use RDP into this server would be coming into the United States. So what we could do is we could say, hey, let's block everybody except people that are found in the United States. So that would just immediately, if somebody coming in from the United Kingdom or Romania or wherever we designate those IP addresses, we could immediately block them at the firewall at the very first attempt. So they wouldn't even have to worry about going through 3 failed attempts. So it's another option. So again, that would be like using a whitelist. We just created a blacklist. So if we had our blacklist in there, we could just say, hey, block everybody immediately if they're found on a blacklist. So let's cancel out of this. Let's go back to our address list, and let's remove this one. So all firewall rules, this is simply a listing of all rules found in Windows Firewall. There's no delete. It's just a view of it. It's a view of this screen here, so you don't have to open up Windows Firewall. One advantage is that if you want to search, if you think you have a firewall rule that is blocking a remote IP, so we could enter that remote IP in here, click go, and it would search for a blocked IP address. This helps in troubleshooting. Windows Firewall by default does not offer this option, so if somebody says, hey, I cannot connect to the server, you could run a quick search and see if that remote IP is being blocked from the server or if it's another issue. Let's move on to the IPMuncher Service Manager. In here, we can control the underlying IPMuncher service. We can stop it. It's the exact same thing of clicking stop up here. Refresh the service. If we want to uninstall it, we can click uninstall here, and all it does is remove it from the Windows OS. This is useful if you want to just move IPMuncher to a different location. There's actually no program to install. It's just unregistering it from the Windows OS. So moving on, service alerts. This is our communication window that communicates, allows the application to talk to the underlying IPMuncher service and listen for alerts. The monitor firewall window is what we just saw earlier from the dashboard, and we can enable firewall monitoring. I went through all this, so we won't have to go through it again. Application properties. Settings, we can control how the application logs, where it logs to, different levels of logging. So we've got a couple other application settings here. Check for duplicate firewall rules. Sometimes if the server is getting hammered a lot by a remote IP, duplicate firewalls can be created if the IP address comes in multiple times in between the time from when IPMuncher tells Windows Firewall to create the firewall rule and the firewall rule is actually created. So you can get a couple rules stacked on top of each other. This option says, hey, just double check to make sure that the rule is not created before we tell Windows Firewall to create the rule. So we can check for IPMuncher software updates at the website that IPMuncher will check once a day. You can uncheck that if you don't want to do that. or we can just automatically, or we can just uncheck it. Another option here is to automatically remove orphan firewall rules. So if we're in Windows Firewall and we just want to delete one of those, IPMuncher will keep on top of that, and it will double check for orphaned rules and just clean them up. We can specify how often we want them to clean, so every 5 minutes we could do a double check. Archiving blocked firewall rules. So in this instance here, we can keep track for 45 days of all rules that IPMuncher created. These archived rules are found on the dashboard screen. So these rules here are the ones that are archived. So we can keep up to 45 days, we can keep 10 days, whatever we think is necessary. If we keep a longer time period, then the database grows. Shorter time period, smaller database. So let's move on to, let's close some of these windows down. We really don't need them all open. So let's look at licensing. Here's where we would enter our eval key when we first downloaded IPMuncher. By default, IPMuncher will detect it if that license key file is there. If it's not there, you could just paste it in here. If you purchase a license key, here's where you would do it. Just click validate and then click save. License key will then be saved in the settings file. Let me show you where that settings file is at. It is right there. That's the application settings. So the last section is email settings. If we wanted to enable IPMuncher to send emails or to send us alerts, we would check that box here. We would fill in our mail server settings, mail.whatever our mail server name is. You want to get with your mail server administrator to get those settings. This is not, IPMuncher will not know what these settings are. You do not send emails through IPMuncher.com. This is a closed loop. It's just dependent upon whatever you specify here. We're just going to set the mail from, the mail to, these different settings. If your server requires authentication, you set the username and password here. And when this is all set and filled in, we could go ahead and test it. So let's uncheck this right here and close it down. We can email ourselves when a rule is created. When IPMuncher creates a rule, we can override the global mail from and the mail to, and send us an email and say, hey, this email was created, this rule was created. We have some different mail merge fields we can use. We have an IP address, the remote IP that was blocked, what rule name was created, the firewall rule label, the date the rule was created, when it's to be removed, a couple other different properties here. In the email body, we can specify where we want them to show up for the mail merge field. So when we actually view this email message, it will show up with these fields merged and replaced. So if we want, let me show you an example of that real quick. If we go out to the IPMuncher website, some of the screenshots here, we can see a mail merge email. And here's an example of an email that was sent with the fields that were replaced. So we can control the formatting and the way it looks. If we like, we can remove or add fields, just delete those out, and then we would click save. Email when a rule is deleted is identical to created, except this email is sent when a rule is removed from the firewall. Scheduled reports, this allows you to email a daily email report. Again, you can override the mail from and mail to, and you can set the subject name. The content is pretty much set. Basically, a grid is sent out of all the IPMuncher rules that were created for today, and we can specify the time we want that report to get sent. By default, this is sent by military time, 24-hour clock. So let's say we want to send out this email report at 8 o'clock at night. You know, that would be 2000 hours. So an example of that, again, a screenshot is found on the screenshot page. And here is an example email that is sent. And you can see a grid of all the IP addresses that were attacked. So that's pretty much run through the screens. One more is left, and that's for submitting feedback. And here you would just, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, feature requests, we love to hear them. I love to hear them. I wrote the application. So you'll either be hearing from me or someone else. Just enter your email address, the subject, and the comments of your body, of your email body. Just enter it in here. and I will be sure at least to see them, and I or someone else may reply to them. So that's about all. That's an overview of IPMuncher. Appreciate your time. Look forward to any of your feedback. Thank you.